Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today, and if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Oh, and here's a question for you: have you ever met someone who thought they could do whatever they wanted, and then got a big surprise? Tell me below. It was a bright, sunny afternoon in the small town of Oakwood. The sky was blue, with not a single cloud to be seen. Birds chirped in the trees, and a soft wind blew through the streets, making the leaves dance. Everyone in town was going about their day, doing the things they always did. Kids laughed and ran around the park, chasing each other and kicking soccer balls. Shopkeepers stood outside their stores, sweeping their sidewalks with big brooms, smiling at people walking by. Cars rolled slowly down Main Street, their tires making a soft humming sound on the smooth road. It was the kind of day where everything felt calm and peaceful, like nothing could possibly go wrong. But here's the thing: looks can be tricky. Just because everything seems quiet doesn't mean something huge isn't about to happen. And in the middle of all this calm, something big was waiting. Something huge. Something that would shake up the whole town of Oakwood and make everyone talk about it for weeks. And it all started with one woman. Her name was Linda Harper. Now, Linda wasn't just any woman. Oh no. She wasn't like the friendly moms who baked cookies for school parties or the nice ladies who waved hello at the grocery store. Linda was different. Very different. She was the wife of Mayor Harold Harper, the most powerful man in all of Oakwood. Mayor Harper made all the big decisions in town, like where to build new parks, how to fix the roads, and even what rules everyone had to follow. Because of that, Linda thought she was special. Super special. She thought she was better than everyone else, like she was the queen of the town and everyone else was just there to do what she said. People in Oakwood didn't talk about Linda to her face, of course. They were too scared. But behind her back, they whispered. Oh, did they whisper? They had a nickname for her, a secret name they only said when she wasn't around. They called her the Karen of all Karens. If you don't know what a Karen is, let me explain. A Karen is someone who acts like the whole world belongs to them. They boss people around, complain about everything, and throw big fits if things don't go their way. And Linda? She was the biggest Karen of them all. When Linda walked through town, she didn't just walk, she strutted. Her high heels clicked loudly on the sidewalk, like she wanted everyone to hear her coming. Her nose was always up in the air, like she was sniffing something bad. She looked at other people like they were bugs under her shoe, not worth her time. If you dared to say something she didn't like, or if you didn't do exactly what she wanted, watch out. She would stop, put her hands on her hips, and scream, "Do you know who I am?" Her voice was so loud it could make dogs bark and birds fly away. Then she'd threaten you. "I'll have you fired," she'd yell. Or, "I'll make sure you're fined." Sometimes, she even said, "I'll run you out of town." And because her husband was the mayor, people believed she could do it. So most people just stayed quiet and let her do whatever she wanted. Linda loved being the mayor's wife. She loved the power it gave her. She loved how people were scared of her, how they jumped out of her way when she walked by, how they said yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, even when they didn't want to. To Linda, Oakwood was her playground, and everyone else was just there to play by her rules. She thought nothing could ever stop her. She thought her life was perfect, like a shiny bubble that would never pop. But here's the thing nobody knew, not even Linda. Her perfect little world was about to crash down. That shiny bubble? It was about to burst. And it would all happen so fast, in just 2 minutes. 2 minutes that would change everything. 2 minutes that would turn her life upside down and make the whole town cheer. Imagine this: Linda, walking into a place, thinking she's the boss, thinking she can yell at anyone, scare anyone, and get away with it. Imagine her pointing her finger, shouting her favorite line, "Do you know who I am?" and expecting everyone to shake in their shoes. Now imagine someone standing there, not scared at all. Someone tall, strong, and calm, looking at her with eyes that say, "Oh, I know exactly who you are, and I'm not afraid." Imagine Linda's face changing, her smirk disappearing, her voice getting quiet, because for the first time, she's not in control. That's what was coming. That's what was about to happen on this bright, sunny afternoon in Oakwood. But who could stand up to Linda Harper? Who would dare? Was it someone in the coffee shop, watching her scream at the barista? Was it someone outside, looking through the window, seeing everything? Or was it someone Linda didn't even notice, someone she thought was beneath her, someone she'd never expect to fight back? You'll have to keep reading to find out, because the story is just getting started, and the best parts are still to come. For now, let's just say this, Linda Harper thought she was untouchable. She thought she was the queen of Oakwood, the boss of everyone, the person who could do whatever she wanted. But on this sunny afternoon, in the middle of a calm, peaceful day, something was brewing. Something big. Something that would show the whole town and Linda herself that nobody, not even the mayor's wife, is above the rules. So, are you ready to see what happens next? Are you ready to find out who stands up to Linda, how they do it, and what happens when her perfect little world comes crashing down? Then stick around, because the story is about to get wild. And remember, it all happens in just 2 minutes. 2 minutes that will change everything. Linda strutted into the town's only coffee shop, her high heels clicking loudly on the floor. Click, click, click. Each step sounded like a drum beat, loud and sharp, letting everyone know she was there. The coffee shop was small and cozy, with wooden tables, soft yellow lights, and the yummy smell of fresh coffee in the air. People sat quietly, sipping their drinks, chatting in whispers, or reading books. But the second Linda walked in, the whole place went still. It was like the air got heavy, like everyone knew trouble was coming. Behind the counter stood the barista, a young black woman named Keisha. Keisha was kind and hard-working, the kind of person who remembered your name and your favorite drink. She always had a big, bright smile, the kind that made you feel happy just to see it. When Linda walked up to the counter, Keisha smiled politely, just like she did for everyone. "Good afternoon, ma'am," she said in a cheerful voice. "What can I get for you today?" But Linda didn't even look at Keisha. Not even a tiny glance. She acted like Keisha wasn't even a person, just a machine to do what she wanted. Instead of answering nicely, Linda snapped her fingers, snap, 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 like she was calling a dog. "Make it quick," she barked, her voice sharp and mean. "I want a latte, extra hot, no foam, and it better be perfect, or I'll have this dump shut down. Do you know who I am?" Keisha's smile didn't waver, not even a little bit. She kept it on her face, big and bright, but if you looked closely, you could see her eyes change. They narrowed just a tiny bit, like she was thinking hard, like she was holding something back. But she didn't say anything mean. She didn't yell or cry. She just nodded, calm and steady, and started making the drink. Her hands moved fast, pouring milk, steaming it, and adding coffee, all while Linda stood there, tapping her foot like she was the most important person in the world. But Linda wasn't done. Oh no. She wasn't happy just being rude. She wanted everyone to know how powerful she thought she was. She leaned over the counter, so close that Keisha could feel her hot breath, and raised her voice loud enough for everyone in the shop to hear. "Honestly," Linda said, her words dripping with meanness, "people like you shouldn't even be working here. You're lucky I even come to this place." The whole coffee shop froze. It was like time stopped. The people sitting at the tables, the ones sipping their drinks, the ones reading their books, they all stopped moving. Some gasped, their mouths open in shock. Others looked away, their eyes wide, too scared to say anything. A mom with a little boy pulled him closer, like she didn't want him to hear such ugly words. An old man in the corner shook his head, muttering under his breath, "That's not right." But nobody spoke up. Nobody dared to challenge Linda. Because Linda wasn't just any rude person, she was the mayor's wife, the most powerful woman in Oakwood, or so she thought. And who would dare stand up to someone like that? Linda saw everyone's reaction, and she loved it. She smirked, her lips curling up in a nasty little grin. She loved the attention. She loved seeing people scared, shocked, or silent. To her, it was proof that she was untouchable, that she could say whatever she wanted, do whatever she wanted, and nobody would stop her. After all, who would dare challenge the mayor's wife? Who would risk making her mad, knowing she could snap her fingers and ruin their life? Linda stood there, tall and proud, her nose in the air, thinking she was the queen of the coffee shop, the queen of the town, the queen of everything. But here's the thing Linda didn't know. Here's the secret that was about to change everything. Outside, through the big glass window of the coffee shop, someone was watching. Not just watching, but really watching, with eyes that saw everything, eyes that missed nothing. A tall figure stood on the sidewalk, his arms crossed over his chest. He wore a crisp police uniform, dark blue and neat, with a shiny badge pinned to his shirt. The badge gleamed in the sunlight, sparkling like a star, and his eyes were locked on Linda, watching every move she made, hearing every word she said. This was Officer Marcus Jones, one of the best cops in Oakwood. Marcus wasn't just any cop. Oh no. He was special. He was the kind of person who believed in doing what was right, no matter what. He didn't care if you were rich or poor, young or old, powerful or not. To Marcus, the rules were the rules, and nobody was above them. Not even the mayor's wife. Marcus stood there, tall and strong, his face calm but his eyes sharp, like a hawk watching a mouse. He saw Linda snap her fingers. He saw her yell at Keisha. He heard her mean words, her threats, her ugly smirk. And inside, something started to burn. Not anger, not yet, but something else, something like justice, waiting to come out. Inside the shop, Keisha kept working, her hands steady even though Linda's words were so cruel. She didn't cry, she didn't yell, she didn't even frown. She just kept smiling, that big, bright smile, like nothing could touch her. But if you looked closely, you could see a tiny spark in her eyes, a little fire that said, "I'm not weak. I'm not scared. I'm stronger than you think." Keisha was used to people like Linda, people who thought they could push her around because of who she was, because of how she looked. But Keisha wasn't the kind of person to break. She was tough, tougher than Linda could ever imagine. And outside, Marcus kept watching. He saw Keisha's strength, her quiet power, and it made him nod, just a tiny bit, like he was saying to himself, "Good for you." But then his eyes went back to Linda, and his face got a little harder, a little sharper. Because Marcus knew something Linda didn't. He knew that people like her, people who thought they could do anything, always got a surprise in the end. Always. And today, that surprise was coming. It was coming fast, and it was coming in the shape of a tall, strong cop with a shiny badge and a heart full of justice. Keisha handed Linda her latte, still smiling, even though Linda didn't deserve it. The cup was warm, the coffee smelled yummy, and Keisha had made it just right, extra hot, no foam, exactly how Linda wanted. Keisha's smile was big and bright, the kind of smile that made you feel happy, even on a bad day. "Here you go, ma'am," Keisha said sweetly, her voice soft and kind. "I hope it's perfect for you." But Linda didn't say thank you. She didn't even nod. She didn't care about being nice or polite. Instead, she snatched the cup from Keisha's hands, her fingers grabbing it so fast it almost spilled. She held it up, looking at it like it was something dirty, something she didn't even want to touch. Then she took one tiny sip, just one, and her face twisted up like she'd tasted something gross. "This is garbage!" Linda screamed, her voice so loud it made the windows shake. And then, without warning, she threw the cup on the floor. Hard. The cup hit the ground with a loud crash, and hot coffee splattered everywhere, like a big, messy explosion. It splashed on the counter, it splashed on the floor, and worst of all, it soaked Keisha's shoes, making them all wet and sticky. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" Linda yelled, pointing her finger at Keisha, her face red with anger. "I'm calling my husband right now, and you'll be out of a job by tonight." Her voice was so loud, so mean, that it felt like the whole coffee shop was shaking. She stomped her foot, her high heels clicking even louder, and pulled out her phone, waving it in the air like it was a magic wand that could make all her wishes come true. The customers in the coffee shop didn't know what to do. They just sat there, their eyes wide, their mouths open, watching the whole thing like it was a scary movie. Some of them whispered to each other, their voices soft and quiet so Linda wouldn't hear. "She's gone too far," one woman muttered, shaking her head. She had curly hair and glasses, and she looked worried, like she wanted to help but didn't know how. "Someone needs to stop her," said an old man in the corner, his voice shaking. He had a white beard and a cane, and he looked like he'd seen a lot of things in his life, but nothing like this. But even though they whispered, even though they knew Linda was being mean, nobody moved. Nobody stood up. Nobody wanted to be Linda's next target. Because Linda wasn't just loud or rude, she was dangerous. She was the mayor's wife, And everyone knew she could make their lives hard if they dared to challenge her. Keisha, though, didn't move either. She didn't run away, she didn't cry, she didn't even frown. She just stood there, behind the counter, her apron wet from the coffee, her shoes sticky, but her head held high. That big, bright smile was still on her face, like nothing could touch her, like Linda's mean words and actions were just a little breeze she could brush off. But if you looked closely, really closely, you could see something in her eyes. A tiny spark, a little fire, like she was thinking, you can yell all you want, but I'm stronger than you think. Keisha wasn't scared. She wasn't weak. She was tough, tougher than Linda could ever imagine, and that toughness was like a secret weapon, waiting for the right moment. But there was someone else in the coffee shop who wasn't scared either. Someone who wasn't going to just sit there and watch. That someone was Officer Marcus Jones. He had been standing outside, watching through the big glass window, seeing every mean thing Linda did, hearing every mean word she said. And now, he decided it was time to move. He pushed open the door of the coffee shop, his boots heavy on the floor, making a loud thump, thump, thump. The bell above the door jingled, a soft, happy sound that didn't match the big, serious moment. Everyone turned to look, their heads spinning around fast, like they were all wondering, who's here? What's going to happen now? Linda didn't notice him at first. She was too busy yelling at Keisha, her voice getting louder and louder, her face getting redder and redder. You think you can disrespect me? Me, she screamed, pointing her finger so hard it looked like it might break. I'll have this whole place torn down. I'll make sure nobody ever comes here again. Marcus cleared his throat, a deep, loud sound that cut through Linda's yelling like a knife. Excuse me, ma'am, he said, his voice deep and calm, like a still lake on a quiet day. Is there a problem here? Linda stopped yelling, just for a second, and spun around, her high heels squeaking on the wet floor. Her face was red with anger, her eyes wild, like a storm about to hit. When she saw Marcus, her eyes widened for just a second, like she was surprised to see a police officer standing there. But then, quick as a flash, her surprise turned into a smirk, a nasty little grin that said, "Oh, I'm not scared of you." She rolled her eyes, big and dramatic, and said, "Oh, great. Another one of you people trying to tell me what to do. Do you know who I am? I'm Linda Harper, the mayor's wife. And you, officer, are about to lose your badge." But Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just stood there, tall and steady, his face as calm as a still lake, his arms crossed over his chest. His badge gleamed in the light, shiny and bright, like a star on his uniform. "I know exactly who you are, ma'am," he said, his voice low and steady, like he wasn't in a hurry, like he had all the time in the world. "And I also know the law. Now, why don't you tell me what's going on here?" Linda laughed a sharp, mean laugh, like a bark from a mean dog. "What's going on? I'll tell you what's going on," she said, pointing at Keisha again, her finger shaking with anger. "This girl," she said, girl like it was a bad word, "is incompetent, and I'm not going to stand for it. I want her fired, and I want it done now." Marcus tilted his head, just a little bit, and looked at the spilled coffee on the floor, all wet and messy, with the broken cup lying there like a sad little soldier. Then he looked at Keisha, who was still standing behind the counter, her apron wet but her head held high, that big, bright smile still on her face. And then he looked back at Linda, his eyes sharp now, like a hawk watching a mouse. "So let me get this straight," Marcus said slowly, his voice deep and clear. "You threw a hot drink on the floor, screamed at an employee, and now you're threatening her job, because you didn't like your coffee." Linda's smirk faltered, but only for a second, like a tiny crack in a big wall. "That's right," she snapped, her voice loud and sharp again. "And if you don't do something about it, I'll have your job, too. My husband runs this town, and you're nothing but a—" Marcus held up a hand, cutting her off, stopping her words like a wall stopping a ball. "Ma'am," he said, his voice still calm but now with a sharp edge, like a knife hiding under a soft cloth, "I suggest you stop talking. Because every word you say is just making this worse for you." Linda's face turned purple with rage, like a big, angry grape ready to pop. Her eyes were wide, her mouth twisted, and she looked like she might explode. "How dare you," she screamed, her voice so loud it hurt everyone's ears, like a siren going off in the tiny coffee shop. "You can't talk to me like that. I'm above the law. I can do whatever I want." Her words came out fast and sharp, like bullets from a gun, and she stomped her foot so hard her high heel made a loud bang on the floor, like a hammer hitting a nail. She reached into her purse, her hands shaking with anger, and pulled out her phone. It was shiny and fancy, with a bright pink case covered in sparkles, the kind of phone that said, "I'm important." She held it up, waving it in the air like it was a magic wand that could fix everything. "I'm calling my husband right now," she yelled, her voice cracking, "and you'll be sorry you ever crossed me." She started dialing, her fingers punching the button so hard it looked like she might break the phone. She smirked, thinking, "Oh, I've got him now. My husband will fix this. He always does." But Marcus didn't move. Not even a tiny bit. He didn't flinch, he didn't blink, he didn't even look worried. He just stood there, tall and strong, his arms crossed over his chest, his face as calm as a still lake on a quiet day. His badge gleamed in the light, shiny and bright, like a star on his uniform, reminding everyone he was a cop, a good cop, the kind of cop who didn't let bad people get away with bad things. And then, while Linda was yelling and dialing, Marcus did something surprising. He reached into his pocket, slow and steady, and pulled out a small black device. It was a body camera, a little machine that recorded everything: pictures, sounds, all of it. He held it up, letting everyone see it, and tapped it with one finger. A tiny red light blinked on, like a little eye waking up, watching, listening. "Go ahead, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice steady as steel, strong and hard, like nothing could break it. "Make your call. But just so you know, everything you've said and done in the last 5 minutes is recorded." He paused, letting his words sink in, letting everyone hear them loud and clear. "And throwing a hot drink at someone? That's assault. Threatening an employee? That's harassment. And trying to use your husband's position to intimidate me? That's abuse of power." The coffee shop went silent, so silent you could hear a pin drop. It was like someone had pressed a big mute button on the whole world. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody even breathed too loud. Every eye was on Linda, watching, waiting, wondering what she would do next. And for the first time, Linda didn't look so sure of herself. Her face, which had been purple with rage, turned white, like all the color had been sucked out of it. Her eyes, which had been wild and angry, went wide with shock, like a deer caught in headlights. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like a fish out of water, flapping its lips, trying to breathe but not knowing how. Her phone slipped from her hand, falling to the floor with a loud clatter, bouncing once, twice, then lying there, broken and useless, just like her big, mean plan. Marcus stepped closer, his boots heavy on the floor, thump, 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 each step slow and sure, like a big, strong lion walking toward a scared little mouse. His voice was low but clear, like a whisper that everyone could hear. "Here's the thing, Mrs. Harper," he said, calling her by her name, letting her know he wasn't scared of her, not even a little bit. "Nobody is above the law. Not you. Not your husband. Not anyone. And today, you're going to learn that lesson the hard way." Linda just stood there, frozen, her hands shaking, her eyes darting around the room, looking for a way out, looking for someone to help her, but there was nobody. The customers, who had been so quiet, so scared, started to whisper again, but this time, they weren't scared. They were excited, like kids on the playground watching a bully finally get in trouble. Finally, one woman said, her voice soft but happy, like she'd been waiting for this day for a long, long time. She had curly hair and glasses, and she smiled a big, bright smile, like the sun coming out after a storm. "She's getting what she deserves," said another, an old man with a white beard and a cane, his voice strong now, not shaky like before. He nodded his head, like he was proud, like he knew justice was coming. And behind the counter, Keisha, who had been so strong, so brave, allowed herself a small, quiet smile. It wasn't a big, loud smile, not a cheer or a shout, but a tiny, secret smile, the kind you make when you know you've won, when you know you've stayed strong even when someone tried to push you down. Her apron was still wet, her shoes still sticky, but her head was high, her eyes bright, and that little smile said, "I knew it. I knew someone would stop her." The coffee shop wasn't silent anymore. The whispers turned into murmurs, the murmurs turned into chatter, and soon, the whole place was buzzing, like a beehive full of happy bees. People looked at Marcus, their eyes wide with wonder, their faces full of respect. They looked at Linda, their eyes narrow, their faces hard, like they were saying, "Not anymore. You don't scare us anymore." And they looked at Keisha, their eyes soft, their faces warm, like they were saying, "Good for you. You're amazing." Linda tried to speak, tried to yell, tried to fight back, but her voice was gone, like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. She looked around, her eyes wild, her hands flapping, but there was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Marcus stood there, tall and strong, his badge shining, his camera blinking, and she knew that this time, she wasn't getting away with it. This time, her mean words, her mean actions, her big, nasty attitude, were all caught, all recorded, all ready to show the world who she really was. And Marcus? He just stood there, calm and steady, his eyes locked on Linda, his face saying, "I told you so." He didn't need to yell, he didn't need to shout, he didn't even need to move. He had the law on his side, the truth on his side, and that little camera, blinking away, ready to show everyone what happened, ready to make sure justice was done. Marcus reached for his radio, a little black box on his shoulder that let him talk to other police officers. He pressed a button, and it made a funny beep sound, like a toy walkie-talkie. "Dispatch," he said, his voice deep and clear, "this is Officer Jones. I need backup at the Main Street coffee shop. I'm detaining a suspect for assault, harassment, and disorderly conduct." His words were slow and steady, like he was reading from a book, but everyone could tell he meant business. Assault meant hurting someone, harassment meant scaring someone, and disorderly conduct meant being loud and mean in a bad way. And Marcus was saying Linda had done all those things. Linda's eyes widened in panic, big and round, like two full moons on her face. "You can't do this," she shrieked, her voice high and squeaky, like a mouse caught in a trap. "I'm the mayor's wife. You can't arrest me." She waved her arms, her hands flapping like a bird trying to fly away, but there was nowhere to go. Her face was red again, not purple anymore, but bright red, like a tomato ready to burst. She stomped her feet, her high heels clicking and clacking, but it didn't help. Marcus didn't even look at her. He didn't yell back, he didn't argue, he didn't even blink. He just stood there, tall and strong, his badge shining, his face calm, like a big, steady mountain that couldn't be moved. Instead, Marcus turned to Keisha, who was still standing behind the counter, her apron wet, her shoes sticky, but her head high and her smile bright. "Miss," Marcus said, his voice soft now, not hard like it was with Linda, "would you like to press charges?" Pressing charges meant telling the police, "Yes, I want this person to get in trouble for what they did to me." It was a big decision, but Keisha didn't even have to think about it. She nodded, her head moving up and down, slow and sure. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady, like a rock in a river. "I would." Linda screamed even louder, her voice so high it sounded like a whistle. "No. No. No," she yelled, but nobody listened. Within minutes, 2 more police officers arrived, their cars pulling up outside with flashing lights, red and blue, spinning around like a carnival ride. The officers walked in, their boots heavy on the floor, thump, 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 just like Marcus's boots. They had handcuffs, shiny and silver, and they walked right up to Linda. "Ma'am," one of them said, "you need to come with us." They took her arms, gently but firmly, and put the handcuffs on her wrists, click, 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 locking them tight. Linda was still screaming and kicking, her feet flying in the air, her high heels falling off, but the officers didn't let go. They led her out of the shop, one on each side, holding her arms so she couldn't run away. The customers in the coffee shop cheered, loud and happy, like they were at a big game and their team had just won. They clapped their hands, bang, 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 and whistled, we, as Linda was put into the back of a police car. The car door slammed shut, bang, and through the window, everyone could see Linda's face, red and angry, her mouth still moving, still yelling, but nobody could hear her anymore. The car drove away, the lights flashing, the siren going hoo, 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 and for the first time in years, the people of Oakwood felt like justice had been served. Justice meant making things fair, making sure bad people got in trouble for doing bad things, and today, justice was big and bright, like the sun coming out after a long, dark storm. Later that day, something amazing happened. The video from Marcus's body camera, that little black device with the blinking red light, was uploaded to the police department's website. Uploaded meant put online, where everyone could see it. And oh, did people see it? The video spread like wildfire, fast and hot, jumping from one phone to another, one computer to another, all over Oakwood and even farther. Thousands of people watched it, their eyes wide, their mouths open, seeing Linda's meltdown, hearing her mean words, watching her throw the coffee, scream at Keisha, and yell at Marcus. They saw Marcus, tall and strong, standing up to her, showing everyone that nobody, not even the mayor's wife, was above the law. Sometimes, the people who think they're big and strong, the ones who act like they can't be touched, are the ones who fall the hardest. They think they're on top, but boom, down they go. And the people who stay quiet, who stay strong, who do the right thing, even when it's hard. They're the real heroes. They don't yell, they don't scream, but they win, because they're brave inside. So here's a question for you, who's the real Karen in your life? You know, the person who acts mean, who thinks they can do whatever they want. What would happen if someone finally stood up to them? Would they fall, just like Linda did? Think about it. Picture it in your head. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one to make a difference. Maybe you'll be the hero, the quiet one, the strong one, who says, no more. Because heroes aren't always loud. Sometimes, they're the ones who just do what's right. So, go out there, be brave, and make your world a better place.